I'm currently up on the third floor of our house because I thought it would be fun to take you on a tour of my studio today. I just think in general it's fun to see the spaces that artists work in. And then also, if you yourself have a studio or a craft space, I know it can be a real challenge to figure out how to organize everything. So I thought maybe I would have a few ideas that might be useful to you as well. Okay, let's get started. So this is my studio. And if you're into crafting, I'm sure you know that it is a major challenge to figure out how to organize everything, especially if you're like me and you dabble in a little bit of everything. So over the years, I have been working on coming up with solutions that really help me get everything organized so that I can come in here and work and not spend a ton of time looking for stuff or a ton of time cleaning up. So let me take you around the room. I'll show you how I've got my space set up. So I do quite a bit of sewing in addition to many other crafts, but I have a space here. You can see I have set up for two separate sewing machines. So I generally have one set up with a single needle and one set up with a double needle. And that's simply because it allows me to work back and forth between the two machines without having to change out my setup when I'm working on whatever project. And I've never been one to be into the super expensive computer-based machines. So I just have two Singer Heavy Duties, and I absolutely love them. They are workhorse machines. I couldn't even begin to tabulate the number of hours that I have put on these machines, and they have basically been problem-free. So if you're in the market for a machine, I will mention this is a 4452. That's the model that I have. Highly recommend it. And I do have one machine that I keep with the table extension, and that makes life certainly a lot easier. So I do tend to sew very, very rapidly. In the past, I've done a lot of production work, so I'm just used to sewing quickly. So these tables are actually, what are they called? The standing desks. So these could be raised. I don't actually raise them, but they're excellent as sewing tables because the base has concrete, so they're very, very heavy bases. And that means that when I'm sewing rapidly, I can do that without the table being all shaky the whole time. So just a hack that I kind of stumbled on really unintentionally. Okay, so this is my sewing area here. Then along with that, I of course have a big table that is primarily used for cutting. So we actually brought this with us from the US. It's just an old like a garage workbench with a nice maple top on it. So super heavy duty and just really does the job because it's a good standing height when I'm working. And then you can see behind me all of my fabric. Now, when we moved to France, I did downsize my fabric quite a bit. So I tend to only use natural fibers like cotton or linen. And so I basically weeded anything out that didn't fit those categories. Now, there are about a million ways to organize fabric. I like to wash everything before I store it. That way, when I have an idea for a project, I can just come up here and get right to work. I don't have to sit there and worry about washing stuff or anything that's going to keep me from whatever idea I've got in mind at the moment. So all of my fabric is organized by color. So I have a bin for red, a bin for pink, yellow, green, blue, and so on. And then I do also divide my fabric out by type. So, I mean, while this is basically all cotton, most of these colored bins are like quilting cotton, and then some of these have heavier weight, like upholstery grade stuff or even outdoor fabrics. So, and then in addition to that, I also keep bins of vintage fabrics or vintage sheets or things that I'm wanting to make projects with. So I have one bin for holiday stuff. You can see I have old cutter quilts here, just like vintage trims and things of that nature. And then I usually have a couple bins going for my scraps. So I'll have one bin of scrap cotton. I might have a separate bin of flannel, And it just makes it really easy when I come up here to see what I have and to get inspired to use it. So especially with all of my scraps, if I have them in their own designated bin and I see that it's getting very full, it sort of nudges me to come up with some projects to put it to use. So this has worked extremely well. Now these are just hefty bins that we got at Target. I think they still sell these. And we have these mainly because they're clear so I can kind of see what I've got, but also because they happen to fit really well on this shelf. So this is a like super duper heavy shelf because all of this fabric, to have it all stored in one place, is quite heavy. So Mr. Huff came up with this configuration for me, and then we just happened to figure out that these hefty bins fit the shelf perfectly. So we're using every bit of the space. And I was just lucky that this had a spot in this room, because this is really the only place in this room that this would fit. And this is something we brought with us from the US. So really glad we were able to keep this system because it works super well for me. Now, the other very important piece of my sewing stuff are all of my notions and trims and all of those sorts of things. Now, for years, it was really difficult for me to figure out how I was going to organize this stuff. And then eventually we came across these art bins, and they are absolutely perfectly suited to organizing my stuff. Now, these are sized, they're like 12 by 12 inches. So they're designed to be a size that works with scrapbooking papers and things. But I can show you how I've got mine organized. So Mr. Huff could tell you I am a label fanatic. I love to put labels on things so that I know where things are, and so that anybody else who comes in here also knows where things are. So let me show you. These bins, we'll carry a couple over here to the table. So these bins, despite being not particularly large, so they're not very deep top to bottom, but it's absolutely shocking how much stuff fits in them. So what I have found is that because they're not super deep, that I don't end up having a lot of wasted space over top of the area where I might be organizing something, so that I'm not wasting any of the available space in my craft room. And these are designed so that they kind of nest inside of each other. So there's a lip here on the top that the other one sits right into it. So it's great because I have these organized by craft. So the ones that we're over here looking at now are all of my sewing things. So here's my Velcro. And again, you can see it holds a ton of Velcro, but it doesn't take up a whole lot of space, or it doesn't have a big footprint. So this was a game changer, absolutely. It is a bit of an investment. It's something that I did over time, but it just is a fantastic solution for me. And I have, just to give you an idea of how I organize my stuff in the categories, I'll just run through some of the categories that I've chosen. So I have some for sewing notions, felting tools, leather working, laminated cotton fabric, some that are for specific projects that I'm working on, like towels and sachets and different things. But over here, hardware. So I've got all of my sewing related hardware in one bin. You can see it holds a ton. So we have fabric, paint, cording, a couple bins. Sometimes if I have a lot of something, I will have 2 bins or more on top of each other. Webbing, rickrack, lace, doilies. You saw my Velcro, fusible webbing, elastic, bias tape, all of my eyelets and grommets, snaps, zippers, more zippers. This is just an empty one for now. Needles, cotton thread, more sewing notions, all of my continuation of cotton thread, interlocking thread, poly thread, I like the polyester stuff, and embroidery stuff. So all of my sewing notions here in one area. So it's just fantastically organized. If I have a project, I know exactly which bin to grab. And then otherwise, it's just here in a corner, not taking up much space. So all of these 4 stacks are my sewing supplies. And then this here on this wall is all of my, more of my like paper craft stuff or things like for ephemera. And so, so I have bins of ephemera. These are kind of fun. We'll peek at these. So I just collect little interesting things if I'm out thrifting that I think might be fun to use in a project. And I've shown you some of these things before. So like the old green stamps and their books from back in the day. Remember when people used to make the bubblegum paper chains? So just all sorts of things that inspire me to work on projects. So I might use these actual original things in a project, or I might scan them and use them as a layer in something. So old letters, French game cards, just all sorts of things that I might use if I was scrapbooking or journaling or whatever. Okay, so again, because I know it can be a challenge to figure out how to organize your stuff, I can just run through some of the categories and just give you an idea of how I choose to divide my stuff to make it make sense for me when I'm working. So a couple bins of ephemera that we just looked at, binding tape because I make my own books, stuff to make garden journals, and just other specific projects. I have all of my scraps, my leftover pieces here so that I make sure I use those first. Quite a few bins of scrapbook paper here. And then on to things like cardstock, specialty papers, vellum. I've got things like chipboard stuff here. Then we've got some holiday specific things. So I have a couple bins of stuff for Christmas paper crafting, and various little findings and things. These are several bins of rub-ons and stickers. These are printables that we've done for the website that I've got things that I've printed out if I need them for photos or whatever. And then I really, really do like to do a lot of stuff with ephemera. So I have a pretty big collection of vintage flashcards and bingo cards. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 bins of bingo cards. We used to make notebooks out of them that we sold. And then I have like vintage game pieces that can be fun to use in projects. And then various types of magnets and embossing powders and some name tags that I like to use to like label things. Grommets, snaps, and then another bit of magnets. So again, I have then one wall where I know all of my paper stuff is, and one where I know all of my sewing stuff is. Now, I have a pretty large collection of rubber stamps and rubber stamp pads. So I had always been challenged with how to organize those. And a while back, I saw this idea online that somebody had used old cassette tape holders for their stamp pads. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And so for several years, I had kept a lookout for those when we were shopping like at thrift stores and yard sales. And I never really found any until we moved here to France. And we were checking out at my favorite thrift store. And I happened to look up and they had several of these racks. So these are actually wooden, which is really nice. And they were stained. And I don't remember what we paid for them. It might have been like €1 or 2. It was really cheap. So I bought all of them and I repainted them white. And you can see they perfectly hold all of my stamp pads. They are the perfect size. And since a lot of these stamp pads have the colors on the outside, I can very quickly see at a glance what I've got, and it just reminds me to put everything to use. Okay, so now that I've shown you this side of the studio, let me show you the other side. So I don't know if you have this problem, but for years, I really struggled with how to organize all of my ribbon. So for many years, I had it in these giant tubs, and it was always this big tangle. And whenever I had a project, I had to sort through all of it to find what I needed. So I finally came up with a solution, and it really basically has two prongs. So the first thing is that I have this caddy, and if you can believe it or not, we actually found this, rescued it from a dumpster when college kids were moving out. So it's this incredibly nice caddy that we were able to get for free. So all of my stuff that I'm like actively using for projects or for specific things, we'll say, I have in this caddy. So I have all of my Grosgrain stuff in here, and you can see it allows me to very quickly see what I have and to decide what I'm going to pull and use. So these are like full rolls of ribbon. But if you're like me, and I know you probably are because if you're watching this, you're probably frugal. I also am somebody who collects lots of little bits of ribbon from here and there because I know I can find a use for them. So my solution for that are these caddies over here. So these are from a company called Deflecto. And they have these individual caddies that stack, and then you can buy these wheelbases for them. So let me show you, like, if you haven't noticed with the fabric already, I am very into organizing my craft supplies by color. It's just the way I think about a project. Usually I have an idea in my mind of how I want something to look, and that usually means I know what colors I want to use. So it saves me a ton of time if I can just drill down to those colors and kind of eliminate everything else. So these caddies are awesome. So they unclip like this, and then you can carry the caddy over to your work table. So this is all reds. And what I love about these is they have a couple different compartments in each caddy. So I use the largest one for full spools. So these are all reds. And then it also has a couple smaller compartments, and I use this to stash all of the stuff that's already been cut. So if I get a ribbon on a gift or some product that I buy, then I can stash it here and I can find a way to put these to use. So these are really cool because, you know, I showed you that you can unlock a caddy and take it to go work, but you can also lift these individual compartments out of the caddy. So it's very modular, and it just works super well for me. So it took me a little bit of time, of course, to initially organize everything by color, but you know, I've got one for red, I've got one for pink. We just go all the way down the rainbow, and then I can lock them together when I'm not using them, and then this whole caddy is one piece. So super great. I have 3 of them just simply because I wanted to make sure I had one for each color that I was working with, and I even have separate ones for metallics. I have metallic, like I have gold, I have one for silver. And then you can see I have even a few empty, because one thing I always try to do is include room for expansion in my studio, because one thing I've noticed over the years is you sit there and you organize all the stuff you have, and then very shortly down the road, you're back to having piles of things that are kind of accumulating because you don't have a spot for them. And it's because your collection has grown and you don't have a spot for certain things yet. So I try to build extra space into my storage just off the bat so that when new stuff comes in, I still have a spot to put it in. So these are great, and I just keep these tucked under this desk when I'm not using them so they stay out of their way. And I feel like I use ribbon more often in projects now that it's easier for me to access it. Okay, so that's another big area organized. Now this table looks a bit of a mess. This is more stuff pertaining to our paper crafts. So a couple really, really high quality paper cutters. Like this one can cut like 250 sheets at a time. It's very precision. And then more cutting stuff. So things to make journals, to do spirals and bindings and that sort of thing. So basically paper stuff with the exception of this. This is a crimping machine. So I guess you could use it for paper, but we use it to, it's like a vintage crimper that we use to pink the edges of fabric. And then really not too much left to go through. So these bins also stack and kind of nest on each other. I think these were Sterilite bins. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but glues and adhesives, wood crafts, a couple of those, all of my Mod Podge and sealers, second bin of glue and adhesives. This is corks. And then these are papers that we would maybe use on projects if we were printing something. So cardstocks, specialty computer papers, that sort of thing. So again, I really love bins that stack well without tumbling. It allows me to make the best use of the space I've got in the room. Okay, so earlier I showed you how I organize my stamp pads. Now let me show you how I organize my rubber stamps. So these bins here are amazing because they're super, super skinny, which means they're the perfect size for rubber stamps without taking up a lot of extra space. So I had all of these in the like shoebox bins before, and they just had a lot of wasted space. So these are really about the height of a rubber stamp and no more. And what's great is that these, like all of my other storage, stack. I was looking these up today because I couldn't remember what the name was. So the company is Iris. And when they initially put these out, they were for organizing board games. But these are ideal for rubber stamps, and I know that there are quite a few crafters who use them for that now. So I have these divided out by theme. So again, if I make something easy for me to use, I'm going to use it a lot more. So the one on the top is miscellaneous stuff that didn't fit into categories. And I have one for plants, gifts and greeting cards, letters and numbers. I've got 2 of those. Animals and bugs, hearts, large patterns, like if I'm putting a background pattern on the journal or something, Christmas, and then a second bin of Christmas and other holidays. So super compact, way less space than my stamps used to take. And like I said, I'm way more likely to use them when they're that easy for me to go grab them. Okay, so this dresser is one that was left behind by the previous homeowners. So I just kept it in here and put it to use in my storage. So I have a drawer that houses all of my craft punches. Super fun. There's one that I just recently finally figured out for my quilting squares, some of my small cutting mats, and our smaller scale rulers. So I had never had a good spot for my quilting squares, so it's really nice to have a spot for those finally. Okay, so this one, glitter, printmaking, calligraphy, and all of my circle cutters. So whole drawer, each of these is a bin for each of those categories. So again, very quick and easy to find what I'm looking for. And also, as I've said, easy for other people to find stuff too, because we have crafty kids. My husband's sometimes up here doing stuff. Makes it easy for people to find stuff without having to ask, and to also know where it goes afterwards. So this one is all combs and spirals for making like bookbinding kind of stuff. Okay, so I also have this little dresser that has been with us at craft shows for many years. I'll probably repaint it at some point. It looks like it needs it. So I've got one that's just replacement blades for Things like utility knives, but also our rotary cutters. So pinking ones and regular, super important. And then this one is glass cutting tools, as well as my pottery tools. Okay, so now I just have a couple more areas to show you. So this area over here, the dresser was one that we bought from the previous homeowner, and I decided to put it to use in the studio. So just like everything else in here, guys, by now I'm sure you've seen, I love to label and organize things to like the nth degree. So I've got a drawer for tape. So it's basically like Scotch tape, magic tape kind of stuff. And this one, and then all kinds of fun colors that I've picked up at clearance over the years. Okay, so I've got a drawer for gloves if we're doing something where we need to protect our hands. This one is all string and wire. Lots of fun, every color you could imagine. I do want to mention, we haven't talked about where all this stuff came from. Very, very little of it has come from craft stores. Mostly this is stuff that I've picked up secondhand over the years, or that stuff that was given to us. Okay, so this store here is all drawing things. So it's like markers and colored pencils and chalk and stuff like that. And like things like good drawing pencils, charcoal as well. And then this is paint. Now I was not able to ship our paint over from the US. That's on the list of things that you can't bring over in your container. So I have a small collection that we've restarted since we've gotten here. I had a ton of paint before, but a whole bin of brushes and specialty papers like watercolor paper and stuff in that drawer. So these caddies are really fun. They're supposed to be for silverware, but I use them for art supplies. And if you've not noticed by now, I really, really do rainbow ties like absolutely everything. So all of my color pencils organized by color, which is really easy to do with these multi-pocketed caddies. So again, I can grab exactly what I need when I have an idea. And then I've got Sharpies of every color imaginable. So these get used quite a bit. And I have one back here as well that's just markers all organized by color. So anything that makes it more efficient for me to work is great. Because, you know, I've always kept a lot of supplies on hand for arts and crafts, because I feel like sometimes you get an idea for a project, and by the time you go to the store to buy the materials and you get back, you're tired and you kind of like put the project aside. So by having what I need on hand and having it super organized, I can really come up here when I'm feeling inspired to do that and get right to work. Okay, so these I inherited with the house, these little drawers, and it kind of filled a gap in my craft organization because it's allowed me to have all these little extra pullouts for tools that we use all the time. So glue sticks, school glue, tagging guns, like if we're needing to put a tag or a label on something. A drawer just for the label maker guys, because I love my label makers. So I have one that stays in the craft room, the studio, and I have one for the rest of the house. Hole punches, staplers, scissors, all very easy to grab and put away. All of my super long fabric shears, all these vintage goodies. Just stuff from the past, like our MFH business cards and rubber stamps from when we were still doing craft shows and stuff. And then I have a collection of vintage label makers, the ones that, remember these from like the 80s? So just stuff that's fun to like layer in with journaling projects or that sort of thing. Now this is great too if you collect washi tape. These little drawers are supposed to be for like organizing sunglasses or makeup, that kind of thing, but they're the perfect size for washi tape. So let me pull one of these down and I'll show you. So you can see it has 3 little compartments in each drawer, and it's just the absolute perfect size for washi. So again, I just have these organized by color. You know, my reds and oranges. So I've got 6 drawers, and it just makes it really easy, as I've said, just to come look at the color or whatever that I need for a project. Okay, so I think the last thing I have to show you is this closet here, which sort of serves a couple different purposes. So let me show you. Okay, and the lighting's probably not great in here, but in my old house, we had a closet that was just designated as my gift closet. So it was wrapping supplies, gifts that I had bought ahead on sale, as well as party supplies. I don't think I mentioned that. So I've tried to create something here that's similar. This is a little more small scale than what I had before, but it seems to do the job. So you may have seen back in the day, Mr. Huff made these custom drawers for me to organize my gift cards. And these are fantastic because they are the perfect dimension for my card collection. And I have these little laminated index cards that I made for each category. So I basically have my own greeting card store. And these are all things that most of this was actually just given to us. Like we used to collect stuff at recycling days when we were living in the US, and people would bring stuff that they were wanting to get rid of that they thought we might put to use. So birthday cards, congratulations, graduation cards, thank you cards, all of it's here. Super, super easy for me to figure out what I need when I come in here without having to dig through everything. And then I've just got bins of empty gift bags, napkins, and other party supplies, gift tags, baking supplies, like if we're giving something away. I've got things that are disposable. We have a stash of reusable gift bags. These are all of the reusable ones that we use at Christmas that we made. So you may have seen that in a previous video. Mr. Huff and I made a ton of these one year. So we now just do reusable gift wrap for our own family. And then just a bit more craft stuff, like things that are specific to kids or holidays or things that I might use less frequently. So I think this room so far has been working really, really well for us. Mr. Huff and I are both able to make use of this space, and it seems like it's staying a lot neater than my previous craft room, which I think means I'm a lot closer to having it fully buttoned down and organized in a way that works for us. So I will include links in the description below the video to some of the storage bins and things that I've used in here, just in case that's useful to you, because I know that over the years I've definitely gotten some value out of looking at other people's studio tours and seeing how they organize things. And it's certainly helped me to solve some of my craft storage problems. So I hope you have enjoyed my studio tour today. If you have any questions about how I have organized things, feel free to leave a comment and I'm happy to answer those.